1.2 billion euro hospital was originally due to be finished 3 years ago. Jennifer Carroll McNeil says the new BAM advisors should make a difference.
They're problem solvers, they're ultimate fixers. BAM International have sent those people here to the UK and Ireland, which, let's face it, was slightly overdue, was absolutely needed. But to be fair, I am seeing some of the benefit of that work. But I strongly suggest that we go and ask BAM the question, when will you have your ducks in line that you can fulfill your contractual obligations to the Irish state?
Members of the Irish Defence Forces have come under fire in South Lebanon. The 127th Infantry Battalion came under small arms fire at 6:30 yesterday evening, but all personnel are well and accounted for. The Defence Forces says the battalion were out on patrol in armoured vehicles when the attack happened, and they initiated immediate action drills. It's one of the last tours of duty for Irish soldiers as part of the UNIFIL force in Lebanon, as the mission will soon be stood down. Defence Minister Helen McEntee has condemned the incident and commended the personnel involved for their professionalism in extremely challenging circumstances. The taxi protest is stepping up a gear with 6 days of action announced. The demonstrations will begin in Dublin on Monday morning and will run until Saturday over Uber's introduction of fixed fares. The city centre and Dublin Airport will be targeted again, according to Taxi Drivers Ireland, which says the government's failed to make any meaningful action. The group says it also has the full support of drivers in both Cork and Galway, although no action has been announced as yet for either of those cities. And children and adults across the country are getting ready for one of the biggest nights of the year. The Late Late Toy Show is back tonight. This time it's Grinch themed. Over 1 million people are expected to tune in to the Christmas special, with live audio description also available for the first time. 10-year-old Pippa is one of those performing on the show. She says it's a big deal.
Since I'm a baby, I've been singing a lot, but I never really knew that I was going to be something like this big when I got older. And now my dream is to be a pop star, dancing, singing, acting.
And that's it for now. We'll have more at 11.
If you love amazing Christmas value, you'll love Aldi's festive frozen party food, including Southern Fried Chicken Bites, 12 Dutch Spring Rolls, and a vegan party selection, all at just $1.99. That'll get you in the party mood. And cheers to unbeatable value on Guinness. 12 500ml can pack was €24, now only $19.88. If you love Christmas, you'll love Aldi. DRS supplies. Get the facts. Be drink aware. Visit drinkaware.ie. While stocks last.
Off the ball on News Talk.
Very good morning. I'm Will O'Callaghan. Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim says he's frustrated and angry after they conceded late on against West Ham. A 1-1 draw at Old Trafford meant that United missed the chance to climb up to 5th place in the Premier League. Ulster half Jack Murphy says they feel really confident going into tonight's Challenge Cup rugby opener against Racing. The Northern Province will be without injured captain Ian Henderson for the clash with the Parisians in Belfast. Ulster come into the match in good form, having won 4 of their 5 matches so far this season. The GAA's National Demographics Committee Chairman, Benny Hurl, has warned that many of their clubs won't survive the next decade. He says half the population of the country moving to within an hour of Dublin has created major problems for the association. Only 18% of the GAA's clubs currently exist within that area, and the GAA is committed to growing new ones in the coming years. And Rory McIlroy remains 7 shots off the lead following a second round at the Australian Open Golf. The world number 2 is currently 2 under par. To access 3 free off-the-ball podcasts each month, download the GoLoud app now.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Want to give your in-laws this Christmas? Send them packing with a Ryanair gift card.
Becoming wet and windy with that rain turning heavy at times this afternoon. Top temperatures today of 8 to 12 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Thank you very much, Tara. Taxi drivers will now protest for 6 days next week over Uber's fixed fare system. After 4 weeks of warnings and some protests, taxi drivers have decided to escalate matters. They feel they've been ignored, dismissed, and pushed to the breaking point. Joining me now, taxi driver and protest coordinator David Mitchell. David, good morning.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
I think the expression for this escalation is the gloves are off.
Yes, the gloves are off, Pat. Unfortunately, we've been pushed to this level of escalation, which we hoped wouldn't have to happen. It hasn't happened yet. We're speaking of Friday morning. We're hoping that somebody can pull the plug on this, if not today, over the weekend. But that's only going to happen if we get some traction on our requests.
Now, I've been reading a statement we got from Uber, and they say riders across Ireland are responding positively to knowing the price of their trip in advance. Upfront pricing gets rid of the anxiety that riders have about meters fares, giving them greater confidence to book trips, and it creates additional earning opportunities for drivers. Drivers will always see how much they will earn for every trip before deciding whether they're going to accept that trip or not. And they're based on real-time information and data from millions of trips to reflect taxi meter prices. In other words, they're saying is, if it's very busy and the traffic is clogged, the price for the same journey will be different than the price for that journey, say, at 4 in the morning.
So there's two questions really there. There's 2 points really there in your question, Pat.
Yeah.
And so first we'll talk about the customer and the fixed price. Uber have done this all over the world. I had a fare in my car, an Irish guy living in Portugal. I told him about our campaign. I told him about our case, and he's living in Portugal, and he said, keep with it, go with it, because what's after happening in Portugal, and it will happen here as well. We've got drivers fighting each other for €5, €6, €7 fares. They're driving extra hours to work towards their weekly expenses, the cost of fuel, etc. They're tired, they're fatigued, it's dangerous, they're breaking the rules of the road, they're speeding. This is ultimately what will happen in Ireland if Uber get a stranglehold on this. And so that's what we're fighting against, but we're also fighting against, obviously, the reduction in our salaries. We can only have one job in our car at a time. So although Uber is saying it might create more work, I can't take 2 different jobs in a taxi at one time.
No, but if you take it from the punter's point of view, first of all, they say going home to wherever it is, to Portmarnock. How much? It'll be very reassuring for that customer to know how much it's going to cost to get to Portmarnock. You get into a taxi, if you're depending on the meter, which is the way it is, and that's properly regulated, what the fares should be on the meter. It's transparent. You can see it as the meter ticks along. But it would be lovely to know in advance of getting into that taxi heading for Portmarnock, how much is this going to cost me at the end of the night?
And so how the customers feel now when this really takes hold and Uber starts surcharging that they've done in all the other countries. I lived in New York for a long time. The price on a Tuesday night was double or triple on a Saturday night. So that fare to Portmarnock, which probably averages about €40 on a Saturday night now, and you're standing on George Street or O'Connell Street or Dame Street, and you're freezing and it's December, and Uber are quoting you €100 for that trip. On top of that, they're also offering the taxi driver €30 or €40 on that trip, and they're taking everything in between. That's the way it's going to
They say that the taxi driver, before they accept that trip to Portmarnock, this imaginary trip, they have a choice. It'll tell them, look, we're charging the punter €100, you get 40. Take it or leave it.
So they don't. So first of all, they don't tell the driver what the punter is paying. They'll only tell the taxi driver what they're offering. And when they get enough of a stranglehold on the market, the taxi driver is left with the scraps. And that's just going to result into, as I said before, taxi drivers working longer hours.
Just to explain that to me, I want to tease this a little bit, because you're saying that they don't know. I mean, if you're quoting a price, the taxi driver knows the price that's being quoted on the Uber. I presume it's coming off the credit card. Or do they?
The taxi driver doesn't know what the customer's paying. The taxi driver knows what Uber are offering the driver.
Okay.
And Uber will take everything in between.
So we have no idea, and they can obviously make offers at slack times to try and get people to take Ubers, as they have been doing. Your first ride is free with Uber Eats, all that sort of thing.
That's exactly what's going on. You might get a cheaper fare, and it's only a couple of euro. You might get a cheaper fare on a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock, when demand is low. But when demand is high, it's a whole different story. And in a way, and I know the listeners won't agree. I know at the moment they're angry with the protest. I understand that. We apologise. But at the moment, it might sound nice to them, and everybody likes it's human nature. We like money in our pockets. But what's coming down the road, and when I mean down the road, this is like 6 months to a year, when they have outed all the other competition, all the other platforms, they will control the market and they will charge customers what they like. Now, at the minute, somebody maybe listened from the NTA, that by the rules and regulations of the NTA, they cannot do that. However, they're already charging technology fees, and they're hiding a called technology fee or priority.
Yeah, but Free Now, which is owned now by Lyft, and they're going to bring in their own app eventually. They're still using the Free Now. I think they're going to bring that in. So you've got Lyft or Free Now operating there. They have a technology charge, which mystifies me, to be quite honest. But
They
it's there.
absolutely do, and it mystifies everybody. But realistically, if they were honest with you, they would admit that it's not a technology. It's not a technology
It's a
charge.
surcharge.
It's a surcharge, and what's to stop them introducing that €2 surcharge to 4, 6, 8, 10? This is what they're going to do. And Free Now are no angels either, or both. They'll do the same. And what will happen is Free Now already announced yesterday that because Uber are getting away with these fixed fares, they have to meet them, otherwise they lose their place in the market. So who's going to suffer? Well, the drivers initially, but then everybody's going to suffer. And it's not even that difficult to understand. They've done it in all the other countries they were allowed to do it in, and that's what we're here to fight for. We're here to fight to stop them doing it here for ourselves primarily, but also for the customers.
Now, Uber point out that there's nothing against the rules, even though in Dáil Éireann it was said that what they're doing is against the taxi regulations. They point out that it is not. It is permissible to offer a fixed fare below the meter. Now, they can't ask for a fixed fare above the meter charge, but they can below. There's nothing to stop them doing that. So you want that changed? Is that it?
So again, they cannot surcharge as it is, but they are surcharging. So charging technology fees and priority booking fees, all of them. On the lower end of it, yes, they found a loophole in the system, and where a driver apparently can agree a fare with a customer. Now, I don't know why that was introduced. I'm assuming, being Irish, you know how we are in Ireland. If I meet a girl on the street and it's 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, she comes out of a bar and she's a few on her and it's cold, and she's like, "Can you take me to wherever?" And it's usually about €25, and she says to me, "Look, I've only got €20," and I'm like, "Absolutely," and I've done this before. Hop in the car and I'll take you home. So maybe that's why the NTA had this little kind of loophole in the Taxi Regulation Act. Uber have seen this loophole and utilised it to their financial
Didn't we
benefit.
always, though, have historically hackneys who did exactly that? You call a hackney and they can pick up on the side of the road, the hackneys, but they can come to your house. You call them and you say how much to go to X, Y, or Z, and they tell you in advance, and you accept or reject.
Yes, that's the hackneys. Unfortunately, we're taxi drivers. We are 18,000 taxi drivers, and the hackneys. That is the deal with the hackneys. But we're taxi drivers, and I think that, as I said, I think that agreement or that loophole that Uber are utilising is something that maybe was offered to taxi drivers. If you meet somebody on the street and they're desperate, you can get them home. Also, the Taxi Regulation Act 2013, amended 2016, Section 20, Paragraph 2, also states that the NTA have the power to make adjustments to dispatch operators' policies. So the NTA, maybe directed by Minister Dara O'Brien, have the power to step in and at least put an injunction in place to stop these fixed fares, so we can all go back to work for Christmas. We can serve them.
What would be the basis for that injunction if it's in the regulations that they can do this?
The regulations date. It's just 10 years old. So these app companies weren't really a thing back then.
Yeah, no, which points the way maybe for future legislation to take account of this. But in the meantime, slapping an injunction on somebody for doing something within the regulations, I don't think that would hold in a court.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Pat. Unfortunately, I'm not going to pretend that I do, but that's what we're asking for. If not, then step in and then change the regulation. It's dated. It's 10 years old.
Okay.
The app's free now. Bolt, Uber were not a thing back then. They are now.
Okay, but one of the listeners makes a point, and I think we heard about such a thing coming about. This is, I'm a taxi driver. I don't agree with these protests. They simply need to move to another app or set up a non-profit app run by themselves. It's hard to see why they would make themselves look so stupid. The point, not the stupidity point there, but the point about their own app. I mean, there was a private app run by taxi drivers. Whatever ever happened to that?
Yeah, there are many knocking on the door, and unfortunately, you're dealing with a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation, and moving to another app at the moment, especially the obvious ones, the free nows and the bulk, is not an option anymore because free now are following suit. I don't particularly blame free now, however, they're no angels, but they're going to have to follow Uber's policies with fixed fares because they're going to lose their share in the market. Setting up a new app is not easy. We're actually investigating it at the moment. I know that there's some conversations going on with the NTA from other parties about this possibility. There is an Irish app that's set up by an Irish company, Hola, and we're trying to advertise that and get that out there, and that's very favourable to drivers, but also customers. There's no tech fees. There are no surcharge fees. But we're in discussions with many other options. There's another app called Taxi. We're chatting with. So we're working on that.
Yeah, but isn't that the bottom line? If Uber starts, as you would put it, misbehaving and charging these enormous surcharges and surge charges and tech charges and priority booking charges and all the rest of it, that competition is the life of trade. Someone will come in and say, we're not putting up with Uber. We'll offer you a different product, and the punter will go for it because the punter, if he's being overcharged by Uber, is going to say, no, thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's going to come down the line. But at the meantime, we're kind of caught. We're looking at our busiest time of the season. Whether this was, done on purpose through Uber, we don't know. They're smart men, and they're smart men and women, executives out in Holland. There, this is all planned and coordinated. But we need to stop this. I'm not sure if the Minister of Transport can put an injunction on while this is being investigated. But Uber are ultimately using a loophole in the system to pretty much put their foot on our throat. And, we just have to fight this. We just have to keep fighting it. We said we would escalate protests. We have escalated. We've heard nothing back, nothing official back. And we hope that we do by the end of today or even over the weekend, although I don't see that happening. We're also under pressure because the Dáil, they go on the Christmas holidays on the 18th, and we don't want to leave this sitting over the Christmas.
Okay, so the nature of the protest is that you're going to, over a period of 6 days next week, you're going to effectively withdraw service for a period of hours every day.
Yes, from 7 a.m. Monday until 5 p.m. Monday. For people that are heading out for Christmas festivities, parties and whatnot, you will be able to avail the taxi after 5 p.m. And then on Tuesday, we'll go a different route, head out towards the airport and do a slow drive around the airport for a couple of hours. And then on Wednesday, we're back in the city centre into Marion Square, and then Thursday airport, Friday back to Marion Square. But look, Pat, I think you can tell by the tone of my voice, I hope that we don't have to do this. I really do. I hope that somebody steps in and says, lads, hang on, slow down. Here's what's going on. But we do need an official line from our government. We do, and we need help from them, and we need them to step in and stop this because this is just not right. I've asked all the presenters and newspapers, find me one person that would be okay with taking a cut of 30 to 50% in their earnings, or the alternative, work an extra 30 hours a week. Nobody, not one person has come forward.
All right, David, thank you very much for joining us. That's David Mitchell, taxi driver himself and protest coordinator.
News Talk's Christmas Cash Machine.
The Christmas cash machine is loaded up with enough to ensure a very Merry Christmas indeed. €250,000, $250,000 will go into the bank account of one listener this afternoon. To enter, text FAY to 57557 before 3 today, or alternatively online by visiting newstalk.com/cash machine. There you'll find our terms and conditions. It's for over 18s only. You're paying across the Gold network of stations. The cost, €2.50 plus any network charges. After 3 during Moncrief, we randomly make the call. If it's to your phone, answer within 5 rings, tell us the amount in the machine, and then we give you the money. But if you don't answer, we keep calling until we find our winner. That amount again, €250,000, and it's tax-free. Text play to 57557. More of those comments coming in. The taxi protest is pointed in the wrong direction. No one is forcing them to use Uber. Why don't they simply boycott usage of it? That would solve the problem if no drivers use the app. I expect it's because they realize that customers want to use it and taxi drivers are actively using it. What percentage of taxi drivers does the Federation claim to represent? If they had a genuine influence over their drivers, they already have the means to disrupt Uber by simply withdrawing their labor from that app. I totally support the taxi drivers' action. Uber and Lyft are trying to take over taxi industries worldwide. Similar to the media and streaming services, this limits choice for customers. These large organizations are effectively monopolistic. Think of how Amazon has changed retail. Monopolies enrich their owners and treat workers like serfs. This isn't good for our society and population as a whole. Everyone needs to be able to earn a decent living. That's from Maureen. If Uber is going to start increasing prices, then users will switch apps to a cheaper one. Why can't the taxis just organize themselves? Uber in Portugal and other countries is not the same as Ireland. They are not plated taxis. They are someone only working for Uber. We don't have that here. Why don't they just boycott Uber? There are other apps. The taxi drivers have a gripe, so they take it out on their own customers. It's ridiculous. With all due respect to Uber, I've used them recently in Toronto and Manchester. It works fabulously. Fixed fares and a max and minimum charge. If our taxi people don't want Uber, then just delete the Uber app and carry on without them. Still coming news talk, Zelensky's visit, the controversy around Herzog Park and RT pulling out of the Eurovision Song Contest, all of that on the Friday Forum. But next, is the EU single market truly a competitive market?
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Aviva Insurance, we reward our customers who have car and home insurance with a discount. Acceptance criteria, terms and conditions apply. Aviva Insurance Ireland AG is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Movies and booze.
Today on our special Moncrief show, we're coming from the Sugar Club. The movies we're going to be talking about are Wake Up Dead Man and Eternity, plus black music from Mayke and Ham Sandwich. That's all coming up on the Moncrief show with thanks to Spar from 2 o'clock.
Movies and booze.
Spar.
On News Talk. Conversation that counts.
Start your day by planning your dream future. Put 30 years of wealth management experience to work for you at unio.ie. Unio. Time well spent.
In Gaza, Sudan and Ukraine, conflict has killed and injured thousands, pushing healthcare to the brink of collapse. But right now, you can help Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, provide surgical care, maternity services, and run hospitals. Please, give a life-saving donation today to rush supplies to our MSF teams on the front line. Call 1-800-905-509, that's 1-800-905-509, or go to msf.ie now.
Tesco Club Card gives you the power to more this Christmas. Make dinner special with Board B approved Tesco Finest certified Irish Angus Chateaubriand, now €40. And spoil your guests with Bailey's Original 70cl, now €9.50. And only at Tesco get Coke's Your Own Diet Coke 24-can packs, now €10 each. Helping feed your Christmas spirit. Shop in store or online. Tesco. Every little helps. Available in most stores. Prices vary and express DRI supplies. Enjoy alcohol responsibly.
Harvey Norman, your home appliance specialists. Make laundry day effortless with the Kelly 8kg Heat Pump Tumble Dryer with sensor dry technology that automatically stops when your clothes are perfectly dry, saving time and energy for $3.99. Or keep your dryer running smoothly even in colder temperatures thanks to the Cold Guard technology of the Hotpoint 8kg Heat Pump Dryer. Now $549. Buy today and get an additional €50 Harvey Norman gift card. And with our best price guarantee, why shop anywhere else? Harvey Norman, your home appliance specialists.
This Christmas, give the Eclectic Gift Card your key to 28 incredible experiences. Dive into bold flavours at Mama Yo, Jalali and Caldero. Sip standout mixology creations at Brooke and Periwig and new city centre venue, the Stapleton. Enjoy Dublin favourites like Angelina's, Isabel's and the Grayson. Or escape to the Stella Cinema. One card, endless possibilities. Get yours now with instant delivery at eclectic.ie.
On the wild Atlantic Way, within the storied grounds of Westport Estate, something bold is unfolding. The Grace. A new chapter in hospitality opening spring 2026. The Grace embodies quiet luxury rooted in heritage, connection, and the wild beauty of the West. Relax, revive, and when you leave, be ready to return. Online bookings are now open at grace.ie.
Every year, a fascinating phenomenon occurs. Irish people all over the world flock towards one destination: home, drawn by the
unmistakable scent of the festive 5-ounce from Supermax. Now listen closely as they take the first bite. Truly one of nature's most heartwarming displays. You know it's Christmas when the festive 5-ounce is back at Supermax. For Christmas is in the taste.
Over 10,000 Irish businesses use the All-Go MasterCard to reward their staff. Do they know something you don't? They know that the All-Go gift card is tax-free and it can be used anywhere that accepts MasterCard. They can order a physical or a digital card for emailing to staff, and they know All-Go is a guaranteed Irish company. Get in the know. Ask All-Go. Order now on allgogiftcard.com. All-Go MasterCard is a business-only gift card issued by EML Moneytac and regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Aviva Car Insurance. For peace of mind in minutes, you can count on Aviva. On the phone or online at aviva.ie.
This is News Talk.
Now, text here from Paddy. He says, protesting fixed fares is mad. Fixed fares protect the public. No being taken the long way, watching the meter spike, or being told it's €30 cash for a 10-minute trip because at Christmas your journey isn't long enough. Taxi drivers want to hold on to that system, and now they're holding the whole city to ransom to do it. No sympathy for them whatsoever, and the calls on this are flooding in. A Nobel Peace Prize-winning economist has said there's no true European single market. Philippe Aghion says Europe is falling behind the US in terms of innovation because the market is over-regulated and punishes failure at every turn. If the EU is to keep up with Washington and Beijing, the barriers to entry need to be lowered. Economics lecturer from the Technical University of Dublin, TUD, Emma Howard, is with me now to talk about whether or not we have anything approaching a true single market. Emma, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, we're blaming Brussels all the time for this complex of regulations. During the ad break, we were discussing this. It's not just Brussels. Brussels may be okay. It's the bells and whistles we all add on.
Yeah, that's certainly part of the story, and I guess it's helpful to disentangle this and think about the goods markets and the services markets, which are quite separate. And so where you're talking about those additional regulations, they tend to be in the goods market. So if you look at, you think we have free trade across the EU 27
that's
countries.
The whole idea of the
That's the whole idea. But the IMF calculated quite recently that the barriers that are in place across countries are equivalent to a 44% tariff within the EU.
Can you give me some examples of where we're supposed to have free trade and we don't have free movement of our goods to other countries and vice versa?
Yeah, there's different reasons why. So one is where you have EU regulations on particular goods, so food products is an example. But countries decide that they want to add additional regulations onto products that are coming into their own country. And a good recent example of it is in France. They've just voted to bring in these Nutri-Score labels as mandatory on all French food products that will be sold there.
And we were going to do it on wine and, cancer warnings on wine.
And the alcohol industry successfully lobbied against that. Now, we needed to do that here because we have higher alcohol consumption per capita and we know there's risks, and that was the motivation here. But they argued, and rightly so, that this would be an additional burden to them selling within the single market.
We are the biggest culprit when it comes to VRT on cars. There are a couple of nations who do it as well. But instead of being able to buy a car in Germany and drive it over here, if you can get a right-hand drive model in Germany, drive it here, you have to pay to do that.
And we have been paying fines for that tax, which is actually against EU regulations as well. So, every country has their own particular sectors that they have a special interest in protecting. And what they do is they add on special regulations to try and reduce those trade.
It doesn't happen unwittingly, because the discussion over the last few days has been about the gold-plated regulations that we have added on the infrastructural planning business. If you want to put a water treatment plant in Europe, the rule is you need an environmental assessment for any plant that's serving more than 160,000 people. We have that regulation for a plant as small as 10,000 people. Why did we do that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, I guess because when you're looking at such a big block of countries who have to agree these regulations across different member states, different governments with different priorities, different electorates with different priorities, we have different ideas, and so what we see is then, where it doesn't fit with what we want to have as the standard in our country, this gold-plated regulation comes on top. But I think there's probably more reasons why there are barriers to trade across the EU other than just those regulations, and some of those are inherent that mean that we're not going to see a true single market in the sense that the US is, even if we were to remove those regulations. So things like we've got much bigger cultural differences, much bigger differences in tastes and preferences across EU countries than they would in American states, for example.
So you try to govern, for example, cheese, and it turns out that this particular cheese that is not pasteurized but is adored by people in a certain area.
Exactly, and can have particular cultural significance and importance and so on. We also have language barriers. So, we look at like even things like selling products and having to change the language on labeling. So, there's already these barriers in place that the US don't face, that China don't face. And so...
And they will be, some of those are permanent. I mean, we're not going to get everyone to speak Esperanto.
No, we're not. So where we can work, as you say, is on those regulations. But I think particularly in services is where we can improve the EU single market and where there is work going towards it. Because if you look at those barriers in the services, those are actually so high that it's equivalent to 110% tariff on services.
Examples.
So examples, we've got protected sectors, so telecommunications, financial services and electricity, but really the biggest one is to advance the capital and the banking market unions. So, if you want to get a mortgage, Pat, to buy a house, you can't get a mortgage from a German bank for an Irish property. And so the advantages are, one, to consumers, obviously, is particularly for us as a small country. If we had a single banking market, we would get access to much better rates and better services. But the other advantage is that you can diversify risk much better if you have a bigger market and if you're lending and if you're servicing more different individuals and taking on a more diverse...
Now, when you mention some sectors like telecommunications and electricity, energy provision and so on, but the punter would love to be able to buy, say, the cheapest energy in Europe. In France, it's cheap because they've got nuclear power, and they go to the local provider and say, I'll have some of the French stuff, please, at half the price. That's never going to happen, though, is it?
No, I don't think that's and there's not much discussion of that. I think where we're going to see those efficiencies come in sooner is in terms of the banking and the capital markets. And one of the big motivations for that at an EU level is if we look at the Draghi report that highlighted the challenges that are facing the EU, many of which we're well aware of, things like decarbonisation of the economy, the geopolitical risks in terms of deglobalisation, and all of those extra costs that we're going to face with all of these challenges. And those extra costs are estimated at the EU level to be about 800 billion by the year 2030. So we need more than just public money, we need more private investment. And what we see is a lot of private investment in the EU goes abroad, predominantly to the US. And what we've got is 33 trillion euros worth of private savings in the EU. Now, about a third of those are just held in accounts. So, for us as consumers, if we have our money in a bank account, it's probably losing value because of inflation. But if we can have a way where we can connect those savings to more productive investments, it can help the EU grow, but it can also help us have a bigger return.
Now, what about that aversion to risk and the consequences of failure in the EU? That was mentioned by the Nobel Prize winner, Philippe Aghion. In America, it's a badge of honor to have failed twice before you make your first billion.
Yes, yeah, and we see that like there's much more market capitalization of stock exchanges in the US. So it's 270% of GDP in the US compared to 73% of GDP in the EU, and there is a lot more